Executive Order number 60. So before we get started, I will turn this over to Monica to go over a few housekeeping matters in order to keep things moving smoothly and allow full participation by this board on this WebEx video. Monica, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I ask everyone to please mute your phones and computers until you're acknowledged to speak by Chair Williams. Please also remember to use the raise your hand feature to ask a question or a comment on a particular board item. Remember to lower your hand when you're done speaking. Lastly, when it's time to vote, all board members will be asked to unmute. All in favor of the vote will say aye. Those opposing inaction will need to state their name for the record.
Thank you, Monica. And sometimes I might miss a hand, so people move around in the boxes. So if I miss you, just keep it up, and I'll do my best to make certain I get it. And if you need to just step in, just please do that. So thank you, Monica. Thank you for setting this up as well. I really appreciate it. So I will now call this meeting to order with the first order of business being roll call. And also understand this meeting is being recorded, so please speak up and note your presence and when I call your name. So if you could say present and say your name, that would be helpful to make certain the record is very clear. Janet Miller.
Present, Janet Miller.
Thank you, Janet.
Hi.
Walter Searcy.
Walter Searcy, present.
Mary Griffin.
Mary Griffin, present.
Looking all fresh with all her We Go on and We Go Cup. I love it. Gail Carr Williams, present. Hannah Paramore Breen. Just in case she signed on. Additional attendees, please note your presence when I call your name. Board Secretary and General Counsel, Margaret Bim.
Margaret Bim, present.
CEO, Steve Bland.
Steve Bland, present.
CAO, Rita Roberts Turner.
Rita Roberts Turner, present.
CFO, Ed Oliphant.
CFO Ed Oliphant, present.
Director of Service Quality, Dan Freudberg.
Dan Freudberg, present.
Director of Marketing and Communications, Jason Mincer.
Jason Mincer, present.
Jason, are you excited about our scarves and our cups?
I'm very pleased with all boards apparel for today.
And our caps? Yep. Okay.
Just great.
Thank you. We needed that. We needed a little information. So, Community Outreach and Engagement Specialist, Miriam Leibowitz.
Miriam Leibowitz, present.
Executive Assistant and Board Liaison, Monica House.
Monica House, present.
Thank you. So the first action item on our agenda is the approval of the October 22nd, 2020 minutes. Is there a motion?
So
Yes.
Janet Miller.
So there's a motion by Janet Miller and Walter Searcy a second. Is there any additions, deletions, comments? There being none, I will call for the vote. Janet Miller?
Janet Miller, aye.
Walter Searcy?
Aye.
Mary Griffin?
Aye.
Gail Carr Williams? Aye. The motion carries. We have our October 22nd approved minutes. Next on our agenda is the public comment section. I understand we have two individuals who have requested to make public comments, and I will remind them again that even in the virtual world, there's a 3-minute limitation on their comments. And can you tell me, Ms. House, who do we have today?
We have two public comments coming from our first being Mr. Darius Knight. Mr. Darius Knight, if you're on the line, we ask that you please unmute at this time and begin speaking. And when you're done speaking, we ask that you mute again, please. Mr. Knight, are you on the line? Our second public comment is coming from Mr. John Bull. Mr. John Bull, if you're on the line, we ask that you please unmute at this time. And when you're done speaking, we ask that you mute again, please.
Mr. Bull. So how about we do this? Maybe they're having some technical difficulties and they did do the appropriate measures to sign up. So how about we bypass public comments for now, and if they come back online, we can come back to them, since it's just those two public comments that have signed in appropriately. So how about we move on to Operations and Finance Committee with Mr. Searcy?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. The monthly financial report as compared to budget will be delivered by the not so gregarious but always on point Ed Oliver.
What an introduction. Thank you, sir. If you will look, thank you for putting it on the screen, but it's on pages 9 and 10. We have the financials for September. I will concentrate on the right-hand side of page 9. And just as a reminder, we did do a budget based on full service, so you will understand some of these variances as I go through them. As you look at operating revenues, you see that passenger fares and access ride are actually favorable. They're running a little bit better than what we did think was going to be COVID related, so that's a good thing for us at this time. The unfavorable contract revenues, that is related to RTA services down to Rutherford County. They are currently running at reduced service levels due to COVID, so obviously we would not be collecting all of that contract revenue. The other item is other non-transportation revenue that relates to our rent abatements that we're currently doing with Premier Parking and Dunkin' Donuts. We're hoping Dunkin' Donuts, they might be open, but they're getting close if they're not. So we're looking forward to that. We will use CARES funding to offset that. As far as the federal, state, and local, you see the unfavorable for the Metro subsidy, local subsidy. That's just a timing difference. I know everybody had to hear that. But it's basically that we're just drawing our subsidy slower than we needed, than we had in the budget. As far as the expenses, about 2/3 of the way down, you see a lot of favorables. The majority of those are COVID related. I did a little bit of a dive into the labor and fringes, and the $677,000. Actually, we front loaded on the uniform and tool allowances for our union employees, and they just haven't utilized that as quickly as we thought. That's about 1/3 of that variance. Unfortunately, that won't be a permanent savings. They will eventually use those. We also had open positions from July through September, rolling in maintenance and admin. They're also contributing, and I'm happy to say, too, that we're doing a favorable variance in overtime, so we're not accumulating as much overtime. As far as the services category, that 940, the majority of that is related to our access on demand and taxi overflow services. Obviously, with the lower ridership, we're not pushing as many riders to them at this time. And then we also have some in security savings. While we have bulked up the security in relation to our mask mandate on the buses, not having the school kids in the morning and in the afternoon rushes, we don't have as many officers on duty, so we are seeing savings. If you'll change the slide, please, to page 10, you have the balance sheet in front of you. As always, about 2/3 of the way down, you see we have not borrowed against our note payable, which I'm glad to say. And then one that I haven't talked about in a long time, it's in the non-current, it's in the next section below the note payable in the non-current liabilities. It's the line called refundable grants. You see it's zero now. It was $431,000. That's related, if you can believe it, to our FEMA money that we received during the flood. And this was related to access ride vans. And with the last purchase of our access ride vans, we used up that money. So we will no longer have any FEMA money, or hopefully no other events to cause us to have FEMA money. So the last thing I will cover is on the bottom of the page. You see the accounts receivable and accounts payable agings. As far as for transparency's sake, of the $743,000 in receivables, $350,000 of that was receivable from RTA. I'm happy to say they have paid that by now. And then the accounts payable, we had about $1,500 payable to RTA. That relates to the revenues we collect from the Southeast Corridor and reimburse back to RTA. And unless there's any questions, that concludes my report.
Ed, what is that 40.5K on payables? That's 90 days.
Yes, sir. That actually is one of our access on demand invoices. We went back and forth on some reasons for some discrepancies on it, and it just took a little while to get it taken care of, but it has been paid. So
Great. Thank you.
sure.
If there are no other questions, brothers and sisters, or assistants, then we'll thank Ed for his presentation. And now ask him to give us the annual audit report.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. On page 11, you have this is an action item asking the board to accept the audit. And in that vein, we have Erica Sager here with us. She is the principal from Crossland to do her required communications. I will say that there is also a financial statement that you're used to looking at on page 12 that is done for the audit, but hers is a little bit different, and I'm going to let her take it away from here.
Thank you very much, Ed.
You're welcome.
As Ed mentioned, my name is Erica Sager. I did serve as the first principal on the MTA audit for 20. Professional standards require that we make certain.
Ms. Sager, can you speak into your microphone, please?
Can you hear me now?
It's a little better, yes.
Okay. Professional standards require that we make certain communications to the board, and we are going to go through this booklet. If you will flip to page 1, it's a letter from our firm to you, thanking you for the opportunity to serve as your independent auditors and explaining that a direct line of communication between our firm and your board is an essential part of our duties. And we also want to take this opportunity to thank Ed and his team for being prepared for the audit. They were ready for us and very responsive, even during a remote audit environment. You move to page 2. We have issued our report on the MTA financial statements for fiscal year 2020, and we have issued an unmodified or clean opinion on those financial statements. Our responsibility under generally accepted auditing standards and uniform guidance is to plan and perform our audit to obtain reasonable rather than absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement and that they're presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. At the top of page 3, significant accounting policies for MTA are included in Note A to the financial statements. We did look at these. There were no significant changes from the prior year, and they are reasonable and comprehensive in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. At the bottom of page 3, we have included some of the most sensitive estimates related to the financial statements for MTA for your convenience. We did look at these estimates and key assumptions made when determining these balances and have determined that they are reasonable. At the top of page 4, we noted no alternative accounting treatments. Middle of page 4, we did have a few audit adjustments, which are the typical adjustments that we make each year. The first one was related to the change in the fuel hedge. The second adjustment was to record the impact of GASB 68. The third entry, it was a rather large entry, $23 million for the impact of GASB 75, which we will go over in just a few minutes. And then a very immaterial entry to rural debt position. All entries were recorded in the financial statements, and there were no unrecorded entries. We've included a management representation letter signed by management as a A to this booklet. On the top of page 5, we had no disagreements with management. We noted no consultations with other independent accountants. Other than signing the engagement letter, there were no issues discussed prior to our retention as independent auditors. We had no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. Even though we did a lot of it remotely due to the pandemic, everything went very smoothly. There were no fraud or illegal acts noted by management or the board. And to our knowledge, the only other documents that will contain MTA's financial statements are the Metro CAFR for fiscal year 2020. At the top of page 6, we have included for you our areas of audit emphasis. These are the areas that are the most complex or risky for MTA and where we focus a lot of our time. We confirm that we are independent with respect to MTA. And the remaining pages for 6, 7, and 8 are recent accounting pronouncements. As these pronouncements become effective for MTA, we will review those with management and ensure that they are implemented in the financial statements. But for now, they're just included here for your information. And then on pages 9 through 17, this is the management representation letter. It confirms that management gave us everything we requested during the audit, and you can see on page 17 was signed by management. Are there any questions about the required communications? If there are no questions on the required communications, we'll move into the financial statements. And as you just heard Ed's overview of the current financial statements, I'm just going to point out a few highlights for fiscal year 2020 that I want to bring your attention to. So halfway down on the statement of net position, you can see property and equipment decreased quite a bit over the prior year. That was due to approximately $12.4 million in assets being added in fiscal year 2020, offset by depreciation expense of $20.6 million. The assets that were added during fiscal year 2020 relate mainly to the addition of 10 new replacement 40-foot buses, as well as some building improvements at both Nestor and WeGo. And if you move to page 20, the most significant change on the statements of net position for fiscal year 2020 is about halfway down, related to your other post-employment benefit obligations. That balance increased approximately $23.2 million during 2020. And that's related mainly to two factors. The first one is the discount rate. The discount rate was reduced from 3.5% to 2.66%. And those have an inverse relationship. So as that discount rate goes down, your liability goes up. So that change in the discount rate accounted for approximately $9.1 million of that change. The bulk of the remaining change relates to a change in the difference between actual and expected experience. And how that comes about, during 2020, MTA had a new actuary. And when you have a new actuary, they come in with different methodologies, different assumptions. They also take a look at the medical rates between the actual and expected and the experience. So that difference was at approximately $10.5 million in fiscal year 2020. And I should mention that MTA is currently going through an experience study now. So that should have an impact next year when you see that number. The other thing that I want to mention is that discount rate is very volatile. So in the financial statements, in the footnotes, you can look at it and see what will happen if there was a 1% increase or decrease, and it's pretty significant. So as of October 2020, that discount rate has decreased even further to 2.15. So if that was to be measured today, with all else being the same, that liability would be $97 million instead of $92 million. So you can see how that inverse relationship really impacts that number on the financials. Okay, moving on to the next page is the statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Total operating revenues were down over the prior year, mainly due to the decreased ridership in the last 4 months. It was decreased approximately 65% due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Operating expenses, you can see that those are up over the prior year, mainly due to labor and fringe benefits. The majority of that increase is due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Even though ridership was down, all the employees remained intact, as well as having overtime to work on the the COVID-19 cleaning protocols. In addition, that number includes a $1.8 million bonus, COVID bonus, that was negotiated, and that bonus was paid through CARES Act funding, which was subject to single audit testing for 2020. Then towards the bottom, capital contributions, you can see there was a significant decrease in that balance, and that is due to a decrease in the eligible capital grants for contributions. The last thing that I wanted to point out is on page 71 of the financial statements. This is a new schedule that's required by the state. If there's any activity on the line of credit, the state is requesting that this new schedule be provided for them, showing the detail of any notes payable, which is the line of credit. Are there any questions on the financial statements? Very much for your time, and we appreciate the opportunity to serve as your independent auditors.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sager. And Ed, thank you for your presentations. It's always great to get an audit of this nature, particularly when the board is expressly exonerated from any malfeasance or misfeasance. So we always appreciate that.
And this was an action item, sir.
All right. I think that we can now call upon the young gun in the crew, Dan Freudberg. I believe you have a monthly operating.
Before you move forward, Walter, two things. One, we have to approve the audit. And so if there is a recommendation from your committee for approval of the audit, we can go forward from there.
Approval of the audit or the audit report?
One and the same, actually, or we could call it the audit report, Ed. That's fine.
That is okay. Very good. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Well, let's do that.
So we call it the audit, the annual audit report. So if there is a recommendation from your committee.
Yes, there is a recommendation, and the recommendation is that we, as a board, adopt it.
There is a recommendation from the committee, not requiring a second. Is there any discussion? Any questions, any comments? There being none, Janet Miller, what is your vote?
Janet Miller, aye.
Mary Griffin?
Mary Griffin, aye.
Walter Searcy? You're on mute.
Out of that same thing that happened to me earlier has happened to me again.
I do it all the time. So what was your vote, Walter? I didn't hear it.
If you can see me, my thumb is up.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, very good.
Okay.
Yes, aye.
So Walter Searcy. And Gail Carr Williams, aye. The motion carries, and we do have a annual audit report. And Ed, again, to you and your staff, thank you very much for a job well done. Ed, you know you're muted.
I appreciate Erica's help. I appreciate the words. And Erica, thank you very much.
And secondly, Mr. Searcy, Mr. Bull has called in, and I would defer to you to ask you, do you want to take his comments now, or would you want to move on with your committee and we do it at the conclusion of your committee?
I'm just going to say, if people are not unmuted when they speak, please unmute them.
Upon Dan as of yet, so let's hear Mr. Bull.
Okay. Monica, if you could get Mr. Bull on.
Mr. Bull, it appears that you're unmuted, so you can begin speaking at this time. And when you're done speaking, we ask that you mute again, please.
I will. Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. Here we go. I live 370 Wallace Road, across from Southern Hills Hospital. As y'all know, I ride the bus a lot. During COVID, I've cut it down to 2 to 8 trips really good. A lot of activity at both the Welchwood stops. I know three agencies, Public Works, TDOT, and WEGO, are working together on this project. Comment along those lines. It being a state road, perhaps TDOT could address things like the sidewalks between the bus stops. Reference COVID and masks. Riders seem to me to be a lot more attentive recently. Socially distanced and their noses are covered. I'm delighted that Dan is doing a presentation on the mobility on demand pilot and the Uber contract. I'm really interested in that. Uber, I note there's a discounted rate getting to the bus stops. As I may have mentioned the last meeting, perhaps fold that entire Uber charge into the legal fare, but I'm really interested in what Dan has on that. We go on the buses in the main bus station. A lot of students, especially if the school system goes to off campus, may need Wi-Fi access. What would it take for Wi-Fi to be enhanced on the buses and at the main bus station to handle those 50,000 students, give or take? And I hope you all have a safe Thanksgiving. It's going to be interesting. Thank you all for your time. I'm off.
Thank you, Mr. Bull, and you have a good Thanksgiving as well.
Mute him. He's
Have we heard from Mr. Knight?
No, not at this time. I'm still trying to make contact with him.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Searcy, back to you.
All right, and Dan, to you.
All right, thank you, sir, and good afternoon. We're looking at the operations dashboard report now. I'm going to go ahead and start at the top. This is looking at September of 2020 compared to last year. Overall, our ridership trends have stabilized in terms of what we're seeing relative to COVID-19, as well as our productivity and cost KPIs. They've been pretty steady for the last few months, so I won't spend a lot of time on those unless there's a question. I did want to note about halfway down the page under service quality, the bus trip completion percentage of 99.9%, and actually it was just over, it would have rounded up to 100%, but we figured that would look a little bit funny on the report with what we're showing here, because we did have a few trips, but it was actually the best trip completion percentage that we've seen since we started tracking this particular metric, and that's a testament to the work of our operations department, making sure that we have an adequate number of vehicles staged in strategic areas around the city to be able to cover trips as soon as there's any kind of a disruption to service. We have seen, even though we're doing a good job covering trips, we still continue to see some complaints regarding pass ups, and also just general complaints regarding things like social distancing or mask compliance on board the vehicles. So that does drive some of our the decrease in passengers carried per complaint. You can see at the bottom of the page. We are working with our security on enforcement on board the vehicles, trying to make sure that we can ensure that customers are wearing masks and wearing them appropriately. We're also, with regards to overcrowding, working with Vanderbilt University on a project to actually use our automated passenger count data and farebox data to help identify areas where we have recurring issues of overcrowding, both to be able to inform where we need to have those strategic helper buses, but also to assist our scheduling and planning department as we look over the next couple of months to be able to put in additional scheduled service to help mitigate the overcrowding that we've overcrowded that we've seen in certain areas. And I'm happy to on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Queries from the board.
From me, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the upcoming procurement projects. And on page 18, if you want to take us there, very good. We have an estimated project value of some $700,000 regarding the access improvement study and technology assessment. Rita, is anything in particular you want us to focus regarding this project? The anticipated published date is January of next year. That's pretty short. Pretty short leash. And we have nobody in play right now to do this work.
So I'll turn it over to Amber if she's on the call to give any specifics about this project. But again, as for the January 2021 date, which is right around the corner, that's just the time we anticipate putting this out on the streets to get bids. So again,
I'm sorry, Andy.
yes.
Yeah.
So again,
Very
so
good.
again, what we would just ask board members, if as you look at this description, and if you know of a company or someone,
Yes. That makes perfect sense.
So what?
That's consistent with my
He just needs to
with off the mark view there. All right. Thank you very much. If there are no further comments in that regard, I turn this rodeo back to the chairperson.
Glad to be in the rodeo with you, Mr. Searcy. Right. Thank you for riding your part, right?
Well, enough with that.
Yeah, because I don't know enough about the rodeo to go too much further. In any event, thank you so much for a wonderful report and getting our annual audit report approved. So next, Ms. Miller, how about the NICE committee, the New Initiatives and Community Engagement Committee?
All right. The NICE committee's got some really interesting discussions today. I'm excited about it. And to start, I think we all know how important our Access Ride program is. It's really the one that we've seen the greatest demand and growth in demand for. And I think we all agree that providing paratransit services and on-demand service is really important.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. I get a hallelujah from Walter. So Dan is going to rejoin us and talk about a proposed improvement study and technology assessment for the Access Ride program. So, Dan, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. And hello again. All right, we're on page 19 in the printed packet, and this is the Access Improvement Study and Technical Assessment discussion item. This project is intended to be a comprehensive review of our existing paratransit program, which will include how demand-responsive services can be more completely integrated into our overall transportation network, and how we can better utilize the fixed route, how the fixed route system can be more fully utilized by customers with disabilities. And we're looking for feedback from members today on the high-level focus areas, goals, and strategies that we've got outlined in the discussion item before we draft a scope of work for solicitation. We're currently in the early planning phases of this project, and it's mentioned on the upcoming procurement item. We're looking at issuing a request for proposals in early 2021. The broad business reasons for the project, you can see them at the bottom of page 19. But just to highlight, it's been about 10 years since the last comprehensive review of any kind of our paratransit program. And of course, there's been many changes since that time in terms of technology, but also in terms of Nashville as a city. Before the pandemic began, we were serving more trips than ever on our paratransit system, and in a relatively challenging environment for efficient service, given variable traffic, dispersed trips, and other factors. And some of these challenges are fundamental to operating a demand-responsive service, but some can also be addressed, at least in part, through strategic changes to policy, scheduling and dispatching practices, contracting mechanisms, and other program characteristics. And those are some of the things that we really want to review over the course of this study. So if we go to page 20 in your printed packet, there is a table that provides an overview of the planned focus areas for the project. And there are also some example project goals within each of these focus areas. Many of these goals can be advanced in parallel, but there's also some that are going to require prioritization, trade-offs, and a balanced approach depending on the relative priority. For example, we might be able to increase efficiency by transporting some paratransit eligible customers to the nearest bus stop instead of taking them all the way from origin to destination, if their main barrier to using the bus is getting to and from the stop. But this could come at the expense of a customer convenience by no longer providing that customer a one-seat ride. Now, there are strategies that could be deployed to mitigate that inconvenience. For example, improved bus stop amenities, same-day trip booking, and trip planning technologies, changes to fare policy, and other items. But which strategies we pursue is going to be dependent on the relative priorities among potentially competing goals here. So in thinking about the Access program in the context of these and other project goals that are shown on the discussion item document, we'd appreciate any feedback you may have regarding these priorities, goals, potential strategies, and other areas that we should consider focusing on over the course of this study. And then we'll take this feedback along with feedback that's being provided by staff and also our Access Policy Advisory Committee to refine the scope of services that will be used to define the project in advance of going out for procurement. So we want to make sure we get that scope right, or as good as possible, that we're focusing on the areas that are most important to the community, to stakeholders, to staff, and our customers before we put anything out on the street. So with that, I'd like to open up to any questions on the project and general discussion about feedback you may have.
Great, thank you, Dan. I'll kick us off. I previewed this before today's meeting and just had a couple of comments, and then I'd love to hear from each of the other board members on this. Two things came to mind is I would want to be really sure that there is a super robust part of this study to really talk to the customer, right? Because the ones who are in it every day, this is their lifeline to their lives, right? So be sure that we really understand from the customer's point of view what the priorities are so that we can gauge the trade-offs. So that was really important to me. I know we hear about some frustrations from the customer base, and this is a great way to listen to those and see if we can't make the system better. And then my second thought was, the use of these things, these smartphones, has changed a lot over 10 years. So I think it'll be important to understand how our customers rely on this, but also understanding not everybody may have access to it. But I like the focus on the technology changes. So those were kind of my two starting points. Anybody, who else on the board would like to comment on this? I'm going to start calling on you if you don't chime in.
Well, first of all, I think this is such an incredible service that we provide, and I've always been proud of Access Ride. And so I think it's a great idea to go back in and look at what we do well and how we can do it better. one question I would have is when we talk about maybe picking someone up and then give them a ride to a fixed route. So how different is that than first mile, last mile kind of discussions that we've had? And what makes the big difference possible?
So I'll start and I'll let Steve or anybody else hop in if they'd like to, but it's actually very similar. I think the main differentiating factor there would be if we're looking at something like that, we're looking at the needs of the particular customer as opposed to a particular service area. So we could conceivably have connecting services like that for all paratransit customers for whom it makes sense to do so based on their needs and abilities that could cover the entire geography, whereas a first and last mile area that's open to the general public might be more focused in geographic scope at least.
And I do echo Janet's sentiments about talking to customers because that's just so critical for success.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got that noted.
Thanks. How about you, Mary? How about our newbie board member? Any thoughts?
I was working on figuring out where my raising my hand is. I keep bouncing between Zoom, Teams, and WebEx.
Me too.
Yes, thank you. I was focused on the word. I agree completely. First of all, with talking to the customers, right? When it's customer-based service, we want to do that, and then how intuitive that self-service is. For both the population that we currently serve in Access Ride and the population that perhaps we could be serving in Access Ride, right? And I'm not going to say that I know the whole full exactly what's required, on the end of how many we can actually even handle if we were to, expand the service, for example. But one thing that I keep running across is I seem to feel like there are more people that have smartphones than I keep running across that actually do. And how reliant are we becoming, on the smartphone, as the way when we talk about intuitive? Is it intuitive, to us, or is it actually intuitive? And that goes back to the customer, to their needs, right? So that's in my general, sort of I think it all goes back exactly to the customer. And some of that's going to be, are we asking the right questions? And are we always asking that question, is there anything that you wish that I had asked you?
Yeah. Great. Really great feedback. Yeah. Walter, how about you?
Yeah, let me speak as a customer. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I consume both products, Access Ride and Access on Demand. And my experience has been uniformly good. So what I would like to see first and foremost is what have been the areas of complaint historically that we can address before we reach out to one more customer. Let's look at those complaints already on file from customers that are repetitive, that we want to look at first and foremost. The second thing I would suggest is that we actually, what I would like to do is, since we have one, is consult our APAC committee regarding this. And Dan, I suspect that you have done some of this or going to do it and do more of it, and solicit from them what their encounters may reveal to us. Now, the caveat is that group is predominantly a sight impaired group, and when we talk about our impaired population overall, there are far more types of disability than sight impairment, even though that committee is fairly well dominated by the latter. So those would be my two. And unlike Jan, I did not look at this with any concentration earlier. So I'm looking at it now, and for the first time. And so I think that right now, those are my only two comments. And I'm more than happy to continue to focus on this as you need me to.
Great. Such good comment. And Walter, that's such a good point about being sure that we cross the spectrum of who the customer is. So I think that's really a good point. So I think, anybody else got anything to add? Dan, I think we're just kind of excited about the process. And I also agree with Walter. I'm crazy about that APAC committee. They're so thoughtful and so passionate, and they are not shy about topics. So I think they're an excellent resource for us. So with that, I don't believe we have an action item. This was really for discussion.
Correct.
Is that right, Dan? So does that help you get what you need?
Yeah, no, this is great. This is exactly the kind of feedback we were looking for, and we're absolutely engaging with the APAC committee. They've provided some valuable feedback already, and we're going to follow back up with them at their next meeting for some additional feedback. So thank you very much.
All right, Dan, you're not going anywhere. We're not done with you yet. So next up, we have a discussion about the mobility on demand concept. We've talked a lot about this over the past few years, and we have an item that we would like to take action on today regarding a pilot contract with Uber. So with that, Dan, I'll hand it back to you for that discussion.
Great, thank you. All right, we're at the top of page 22 now for the mobility on demand first and last mile pilot with Uber. And you might recall earlier this year we had provided an updated overview of the mobility on demand concept in the context of a potential pilot project in Antioch in southeast Davidson County that would provide first and last mile on demand connections to the Route 55 Murfreesboro Pike. And the process took a little bit longer than originally anticipated, but we finally come to an agreement in principle with Uber on a program that would provide these connecting trips directly within their platform, with WeGo subsidizing a portion of eligible trips to make the service affordable and compelling for customers to use. One highlight of the contractual considerations that took a good deal of deliberation is provided in the middle of page 22, just where some of the issues that we did need to work through over the past few months. And I did want to just call out one, which was with regards to data sharing. We were especially sensitive to establishing a strong data sharing agreement, and this was in response to specific needs that we had as an agency and information that we wanted to make sure we had to make this a successful service for customers. And also, this was in response to lessons learned from discussing, learning from the experiences that other agencies have had in implementing similar pilots. Today's item is specifically to recommend authorizing the CEO to execute a pilot contract with Uber. This is really only the first step in developing and deploying the service. There's an implementation plan overview that's at the bottom of page 22, and it highlights some of the upcoming activities. With this being a pilot, it's really important that we establish clear evaluation criteria by which we will measure success. And some of these measures may be subjective, for example, unstructured customer feedback and some formal surveys, but others will be specific and quantifiable, for example, trip costs and usage statistics, that kind of thing. In addition to measuring success, we want to ensure that we have the appropriate procedures developed and in place to support the program, and that staff receive the training necessary to execute the program. We don't anticipate significant staff resource requirements to support the pilot, but the initial rollout will rely fairly significantly on the familiarity of frontline staff, such as operators and customer care, with the characteristics of the program to help educate customers. And direct public engagement, including stakeholder outreach and customer education, will also be critical to ensuring that potential users of the program are aware of the program's existence and that they know how to use it. So taking the above activities into consideration, as well as the need to coordinate with potential fixed route service changes that are being under consideration in response to changing conditions related to the pandemic, we anticipate about a 4 to 6 month lead time from when we actually execute a contract to when we would have a service beginning. So sometime towards the middle of calendar year 2021. The specific recommendation before the MTA Board of Directors today is to permit the Chief Executive Officer to execute a contract with Uber Technologies Incorporated to engage in a first and last mile pilot program connecting customers to fixed route services. The initial contract term would be for 18 months with a not to exceed amount of $100,000. Funding for the pilot is available through fiscal year 2021 local operating assistance, with additional operating funds anticipated to be available in the FY22 budget. The initial pilot period would be for 6 months, but we'd have the additional time in place on the initial contract so that we can go through a pilot evaluation period at the end of that 6 month period without prematurely discontinuing the service during that evaluation. And also, before we open things up for discussion, I'd just like to thank Margaret for her efforts over the past few months to get us to this point. It certainly was not a straightforward agreement to broker, but with Margaret's support and Rita's help as well, we were able to get something together that I think is a really strong basis for a contract to support this program moving forward. So again, thank you. And now I'll turn it over to the board for any discussion and questions.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Margaret takes on Silicon Valley and Margaret wins. I'm not surprised one bit. So do we have questions or comments? I would just kind of start by saying that, amen. I'm so glad I knew this could be done. I know the first last mile thing is such a puzzle for us. So I love that we're going for something innovating and a partnership rather than just trying to solve it ourselves. So I'm super excited about it. And I like that it's a pilot that's super manageable and that we can keep our arms around, because this is a brave new world partnering with a company like Uber. So other board comment or questions?
Yeah, of course. Maggie, with the first opportunity you get, let's see a draft of the contract. And because I think that any response I'm going to have is going to be, what are we getting in return? What are we giving up in exchange? And then, that's basically it. And I think the concept is great. And the area targeted is most needed in that narrow in, narrow out section of our county. It may, in fact, be a whole new source of new ridership.
I think that's really, really good point, Walter. I hadn't even crossed my mind on that one. Mary, I see your hand raised. Questions or thoughts?
I wholeheartedly echo, what Mr. Searcy is saying about this is, I think, an area where there can be a lot of new ridership. This is one of my hoods, as it were. I have heavy exposure in this area, having done a lot of immigrants' rights work for 25 years in Nashville. So I would like to say, when we do talk about staff training, that I would be glad to take a look at some of the cultural sensitivity training. It's a different thing. When I served on as chair of transportation licensing, for example, it can be as basic as you do not at all, even to assist somebody disabled, perhaps touch someone of the opposite sex, to give a very specific, example, specifically a man assisting a woman, as would be seen as polite, perhaps, in our culture, it can actually cause a fight. So I think that that this is a fantastic opportunity. There are also folks that there's going to need to be a sense of safety. And when we talk about data, to be making it very clear that any data is really more about the bus and not about specifics about passengers. And I think this is a wonderful choice for an area, and there is a lot of opportunity that I see, and I am very glad to on board help get the word out and utilize any resources that I have to assist in this effort. Thank you.
That's great. Great comment, Mary. Devil's always in the details, right? So, Ms. Gale, Madam Chair, do you have any feedback or questions?
No, I'm just excited about it. I mean, we've been talking about this for quite a while, right? And so kudos to Margaret and Rita for being great team members, to Dan to make certain that this was able to get done, and that really important data sharing piece is it'll be interesting to see how the data comes out too, right, about how we do this. And so just thank you both very much for your great efforts to make this happen. And I'm excited.
Great.
I feel like finally, first mile, last mile, we're going to really say it, but guess what? We're going to really do it. So that's exciting.
Well, I love it when our chair is excited. So, yay.
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think your committee might have a recommendation for the board?
We do have a recommendation now that you bring it up. I'd like to recommend that we permit the Chief Executive Officer to execute a contract with Uber Technologies to engage in a first last mile pilot program connecting customers to fixed route services, and then the balance of this beautiful statement that Dan put together for us. So that is our recommendation from the committee.
Well, with that being a recommendation, it does not require a second, but is there any further discussion? There being no further discussion, I will call now for a vote. Walter Searcy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walter Searcy's an aye. Mary Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you, Mary. Janet Miller, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I am Gail Carr-Williams, and I am an aye. So the motion carries. First mile, last mile, we're on our way. This is awesome.
Great.
Congratulations to you, Dan. I know you've been working on this for an extremely long time, and Janet, the NICE committee's work all along the way. This is just like a great victory right now. So good job.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. So next up, we have Jason Mincer, who is the most patient MTA staffer, because I've been trying to have this discussion for about 3 months now, but today is the day, Jason. So I'm going to hand it to you for an update on our advertising program.
Thank you for that, and good afternoon, everyone. As you've just mentioned, I'm here today to provide an update on our advertising program, as well as brand conversion, and kind of take a look at what the future may hold for advertising. I'm really pleased to report that, we're having a lot of fun changing everything over to Purple, and we're now at approximately 84% of assets converted. By the end of this year, we'll be nearly at 40% of the fleet in brand, and that's been spearheaded mostly by the acquisition of 19 new vans and 19 40-footers, which will be on site. We have slowed a little in the conversion of older vehicles because the painting team was reallocated to install operator shields for the safety of our customers and our employees. The passenger cars are all rebranded on the regional side for your information, and the second locomotive has just returned from being rehabilitated as an in-service and in brand. So very pleased with that. Next slide, please. For the benefit of the board and its new members, I'd just like to say that when we rebranded a little over 2 years ago, we took a look at our advertising policy and made adjustments in four dimensions. One, because It was about safety for our customers, brand impact, and improved customer experience. This had a lot to do with eliminating wraps that would otherwise cover windows and or degrade the brand's integrity. Next slide, please. I'm pleased that this past fiscal year, despite losing 4 months of it to the COVID pandemic, we were able to achieve 98% of our goal for advertising revenues. We have made some progress in diversifying our class of advertisers, but what we expect moving forward and what we've seen to some extent is out-of-home budgets, which is budgets that people allocate to billboard advertising, transit advertising, things that occur outside and in the real world, are shrinking. We are, with the rebranding of buses, we're going to have fewer buses to advertise on, and contract cancellations and limited renewals will also likely be something we experience in the next year. Next slide, please. On this slide, I'd just like to point out to the board that between full and non-vehicle advertising types, you're going to begin to see those dry up as we move to a rebranding. I am pleased to report some great opportunities on the non-vehicle slide. Next slide, please. Transit Stop and our planning team have done a great job of getting our bench and shelter management under control so we can improve revenues. We have looked at modified wrap designs, which are still proving to be very popular. Unfortunately, the 2 new ad types that we rolled out just before the pandemic, meaning the articulated bus wraps and attractive interior types, really haven't gained any ground because of shortage of funds, and the production costs of these can be pretty hefty. So, next slide, please. So, what does the future hold for us in terms of our advertising revenues and program? We have projected revenues would be down by about 20% this fiscal year. I am pleased that after the first quarter, we are trending in that direction to achieve our goal of about $605,000. But as I pointed out a couple times now, fleet availability will continue to decrease with the rebranding, and out-of-home budgets are not likely to return to marketing budgets. So as we start to think about, and this is where I'd like to have a little bit of discussion today, is what might the future of our advertising program look like? We've already started to look at bundling advertising with other programs, partnerships really, with programs like DC Rock, and explore other non-fare box revenue generators, start to look to customize new opportunities with the building of new transit centers, even possibly onboard announcements. Another one that has been tossed around and I'd like to discuss is what it might look like bringing advertising in-house. I know that this was a practice in the past, and for reasons, unbeknownst to me necessarily, we opted to go to a contractor. So I'm really hoping that the board today can provide thoughts, comments, have maybe a brief discussion on maybe what you're hearing in the industry and or where you'd like to see the program go in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Really great report, Jason. I'm so glad to see those dang King Kong ads going. Hated those things. Feedback from the board. Who's got a comment? I've got a couple of thoughts, but I'm going to see what y'all have got.
This is Mary. I would love to see advertising go in-house as a fellow government employee. I think there are times when it is valuable to use a third party, and there are times when you can save quite a bit of money when you have, as we clearly do, very talented, in-house folk. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that and put that out as my thought, having looked through things and from prior experience where we did quite a bit of in-house advertising at TenCare, for example, and saved a lot of money that could go to services, direct services for people.
Thank you, Mary. Can I ask a clarifying question, Jason? When you say bring the advertising in-house, are you talking about the ad sales portion of it, the creative production, or both?
It would be the ad sales and creative production. We presently do most of the installation of our ad types now, with the exception of full wraps. That's done by a third party because of the complexity of the work.
Right.
But it's certainly something we have discussed. So I appreciate you all, your discussion on this topic today.
Right. Gail, Walter, any thoughts?
Well, I can give you a little history, and hopefully Ed's still on the call, because we old timers, right? About why we went outside. We were in-house for a good while, and then I think we started to discover that we just didn't have staff members that had that skill set necessarily to sell ads and sort of be about the community, to sort of go about that part. And also that if something else sort of came about where, a lot of times in our agencies, we multitask a lot of times. And so if that wasn't the biggest priority, then ads didn't get sold. And we were falling very short of our goal every year and just didn't have the staff that had access. And we actually, once we went outside, if I recall correctly, we actually tripled our revenue by being outside. Even though we were paying the cost for it, we still were able to gain a whole lot more revenue than we were to have it in-house. It's just nobody really had the skills. I wouldn't necessarily say skills, but just didn't have the opportunity, and we couldn't prioritize someone going out to sell the ads. And that's sort of how we got in. Is that how you recall it, Ed? Maybe he's not here anymore, but that's my basic recollection.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't call me, but that's exactly what I remember.
Oh, that's right. Murphy's been with me all this time too, so it's really
but without Ed there, but that's my recollection too. Just wanted to chime in.
Yeah.
I appreciate that context. Thank you.
So I would add on to that, which is, to me, I would want to understand the net impact, right? So, and I also would say we spent a lot of energy and time and money on the rebranding, and I get so excited to look at all the purple buses, and I would just be sure that we can maintain brand integrity, because I know there was a period some years ago when I thought, just my personal opinion, that the creative was not very good. So I would just be sure that we feel good, and there may be a hybrid where we can work with a creative agency kind of to be sure we keep the brand standards. So I'm wide open to bringing it in-house, but we've got to maintain the integrity of the brand and not drop back to a third of the sales because we don't have the right talent doing it. So I think there's a more assessment that needs to be doing, I guess, is my bottom line thought. So
sure, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I don't think we ever managed the graphics or any of the art to the ads. If we sold it, or if the company that we hired to sell it, they all sort of came up with their own art and graphics, if I recall correctly.
Well, let me just say this. Excuse me. Whether we're in the house or out of the house, exploring other non-fare box revenue generators seems to me to be a principal focus. And that may actually answer our quandary. I mean, people who are in the business of advertising know where the nooks and crannies are to generate more revenue, as opposed to those persons who basically are equipped to run a transportation service, but not necessarily equipped to market. And but I agree. I mean, there's the answer is probably not one and not the other. But nevertheless, I think whichever direction we take, non-fare box revenue generators seems to be where the nuggets may lie.
I agree, Walter. And I think we would probably all agree that bundling, when possible, is a great idea. I know I just signed a contract today with one of the local media publications, and it's for advertising, it's for events, it's for emails. So I think bundling is a great way to grow revenue. So I think that's a great idea. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
I appreciate all of the history and the other feedback, and I think that's good qualifying for my kind of putting out. Hey, I also support in-house. I will always continue to push for innovation, and that the whole dynamic is being disrupted right now, and so that could be outside or inside. So I would like to say there might be something we absolutely, don't know about, and social media is going in completely different directions. Could be the background behind me is advertising, for WeGo as the new car wrap. We don't know yet. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Well, okay, with Jason, I think we've got, so I hope we gave you the direction you need. And we appreciate the presentation. We love the purple. Weren't too sure purple at first, but we're loving it now. So
thank you. I appreciate the board's insights. Have a great day.
Okay, cleaning up for our NICE committee, we've got Marion Leibowitz, who is our community outreach and engagement specialist, and we're going to hear from the youth action team on their year-end report. So, Marion, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce our next presenter, Emma Delaney, and her fellow WeGo Youth Action Team members, Lauren Griffey and Solomon Kim, as well as Carissa Dieter, Oasis Center Program Coordinator for the team, all of whom will be available after the presentation to answer questions. The presentation, created by the entire team, will be an overview of their work during fiscal year 2020, mostly pre-COVID. Your packets include background on the Youth Action Team on page 25, so without further ado, take it away, Emma.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Emma Delaney. I'm a senior at Cume Fog. This is my third year in the team, and I'm so excited to get to share a little bit about what we've been doing over the past year. So as Miriam mentioned, I want to emphasize that this was the last school year, so the majority of this information is pre-COVID. Next slide, please. Last year, we had 4 main goals. The first was to reboot a mainly dormant social media account. The next thing we wanted to do was connect with our community by sharing transit information. We wanted to host our own listening sessions modeled after the ones held by the mayor's office. And finally, we went to different Opportunity Now cohorts to give a youth survey so that we can get their opinion back regarding transit. The results will be discussed later. Next slide, please. So the first question we asked was, do you feel safe riding the bus? And as you can see, the majority of students did say yes. However, 40% of students said no. I want you to keep in mind that this question was only asked to students riding the bus. Our team feels that it's crucial, if we're going to increase youth ridership, to have more than 40% of bus riders feeling safe using the transit system. Next slide, please. Are your parents comfortable with you riding the bus? We asked this question of both bus rider and non-bus riders. Over a majority of bus rider parents feel comfortable, while parents that do not have students exposed to the bus system are far more concerned by the idea of their students riding the bus. We feel that if we're going to increase youth ridership, it's crucial to have both sets of parents fully on board with this idea of their student being on the bus. Next slide, please. So one of the questions we asked to both non-bus rider and bus rider students is, how much information have you received from your school about public transit? As you can see, the majority in both groups had received no information. We really want to support MNPS in giving students this transit information. We think that schools are a prime opportunity for students to learn how the transit system works, how to operate it, and how to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of them. Next slide, please. After we finished all of the survey data collection, we found that there were several trends that we saw come up multiple times throughout these surveys. I want to emphasize that these are youth suggestions and not suggestions from our team. The first thing that we saw come up multiple times was students requested safety improvements. Several students said that they wanted a hotline or a safety button, just some way to contact local authority in case of an emergency. They wanted more information and exposure to help them get more familiar with the bus system. As I stated previously, we believe schools would be a prime place for them to get this information. And finally, several students mentioned that they felt that the bus was unclean. While we know the bus is clean quite frequently, we believe that this is because of stereotypes that they've heard, and we're going to address those later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Next, we'll be discussing the suggestions that came up throughout our listening sessions. I want to emphasize that these listening sessions were created as a model of the ones hosted by the mayor's office. Students prioritized the improvement of sidewalks, crosswalks, bus shelters, the decreasing of potholes, and the increasing of the number of bus stops across Nashville. One trend that we saw in our listening session was walkability varied for youth. Several students emphasized an overall increase in connectivity throughout the various neighborhoods in Nashville would make them far more likely to use the bus system. Next slide, please. So here are our takeaways from all the data we've collected. The first takeaway that we have is that we need to utilize schools to spread information regarding public transit and the use of Stride. Schools are a great place for students to receive useful transit information that would greatly increase the likelihood that they would be willing to get on the bus. The opportunity to connect with students at the schools is not being fully utilized to its full capacity. And we believe that utilizing these schools is the first step in increasing youth ridership. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, stereotypes are a huge issue within the Nashville transit system. Through exposure and information, our team wants to emphasize the reality of transit rather than stereotypes of transit that are being told. We want students to have their own opportunity to form opinions regarding transit after seeing what's available to them. Next slide, please. Due to these stereotypes, I'm so sorry. This is a slide regarding the main goals for our future. We want to build relationship with schools, continue social media efforts, and conduct more outreach on our schools. Because of those stereotypes, that was how we formed these sets of goals. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our voices. We're so thankful for the continued support WeGo has given us, and we cannot wait to work with you again this year.
Awesome presentation. Emma, you are a dream. Awesome. You're so great. And look at the branding. Look at the purple on the slides. So I will tell you, Emma, I was so impressed with the questions that you all put into the survey. It's really insightful. So, golly, that was fantastic. Any other board members have questions or comments for Emma? And please thank your co-committee members. You all did fantastic work.
Emma, wonderful job, and I love seeing your picture on the bus. That's awesome. I'm just going to assume that you're working with Miriam to talk a lot about some of the issues you discovered, such as the safety issues and some of the stereotypes, to sort of figure out how we too can work with you all to help negate some of those thought processes, right? Yeah. Okay.
Emma, you are an OG. And we
an OG? What's an OG, Walter?
What is an OG?
Yeah.
It's a reference to somebody who's well beyond their years in knowledge and foresight.
I love that.
Yes. And the youngsters use it all the time. That's why I dared dip my toe into youth nomenclature.
And that's why I didn't know what it was.
Great job, and please continue to keep us in your future plans, because it seems to me that you already are on a path of leadership that we're going to need well into the future.
Gail, she may be coming after your chair slot, so watch out.
Again, I'd be honored if she came after. She's pretty incredible, so I would be honored. I give you any lessons you need, Emma, because I think the work you're doing is incredible, And I think you're doing things to really improve. We go and we need help. We need partners like you and your young colleagues. And just to see that you have this kind of vision and that you care enough about Nashville, Nashvillians, and we go to do this kind of work is incredibly impressive. And any way we can help you, we're here.
That's right. Okay.
So grateful for your help.
I can only echo the comments of the other folks. I just think she did an incredible job.
Yay. All right, Emma, take the rest of the day off. Okay, Madam Chair, that concludes the New Initiatives and Community Engagement Committee.
Well, that is awesome. Thank you very much, Dana. What a great report today. You had a lot of work to do.
That was fun. I liked it.
Good job. I'm glad to finally get Jason and Dan up after we sort of, said, see you next month, see you next month, see you next month. We got to see you, and it was both all great reports.
Yeah.
So I think next we'll call on Rita Roberts-Turner for a board meeting schedule.
So this should be the easiest decision you all have to make all day. Although we don't know if our meetings will continue to be virtual or live in 2021, we do want to go ahead and get dates on the calendar. So you have those dates in front of you, and at this time we're just asking that the board would approve this meeting schedule for 2021.
If I could have a motion for approval of the dates submitted by Rita Roberts-Turner.
Motion to approve, Mary Griffin.
Second, Janet Miller.
Second, Janet Miller. Any further discussion? If there being no discussion, we'll call for a vote. Mary Griffin, what is your vote?
Aye.
Janet Miller, what's your vote?
Yes, aye.
Walter Searcy, what's your vote?
Aye.
And Gail Carr-Williams is an aye. So the motion carries, and we get to keep having meetings, either virtual or in person, but I miss you all, so I hope they come in person as soon as it's safe for us to be there. We have a schedule. Thank you so much. Steve, how about a report?
Happy to, Madam Chair. Thank you all very much. And again, I thought it was great presentations by everybody, but with due respect to Jason and Dan, I think Emma took the cake today for best presentation of the afternoon.
Great.
I'll try to keep my remarks brief. I know you all have a very active afternoon. First of all, again, I want to appreciate everyone's cooperation and patience in this virtual world. As soon as we get it perfected, we'll be back in person, so that's something to look forward to. Like everyone else in the nation, we're very concerned about the recent uptick in COVID-19 cases and positive rates. And we're continuing to work with our staff and with outside partners such as the Department of Public Health here in Nashville to try to mitigate the impacts on our customers and on our employees. We continue to monitor, and you heard alluded to earlier in Dan's report, compliance by passengers with our mask wearing requirement. And we have slipped a little bit. We had been as high as the low 90% range. We were down in the high 70s, low 80s. So Rita's group and Mike Moore are redoubling the efforts with our security personnel to try to remind passengers about not only wearing masks, but also proper mask wearing technique. One of the projects that we are going to be working on, and this was a suggestion, frankly, of one of our customer care folks, one of our travel trainers, was to do a video. A number of the board members participated in a video that was appreciative of our staff for their efforts. We're in the process of producing one that will be appreciative of our riders who have stuck with us. And frankly, these riders are the actual backbone of the community. They're getting it done while many of us have the opportunity to kind of hunker down at home. So that's something that's going on. Looking at current ridership patterns and where we might be going out into the future, to give you a kind of a head start on next month. Janet's committee will be, I think, equally, if not more busy next month. We are likely to have a kind of a dual topic agenda in the NICE committee having to do with future service planning trends and what the COVID-19 ridership trends are telling us, as well as Ed giving us kind of an early view into the FY 21-22 budget. And believe me, the two will be inextricably tied together, so that's coming up. Making progress on a number of our capital projects at a very good pace. You heard in public comments, Mr. Bull referenced the Nolensville Pike project. Again, those were 18 stop sites that were due for upgrades and renovations to date, thanks to our engineering, construction crew, and their contractors. 14 of the 18 sites have been completed. 2 are very near completion. The civil work has been completed. There's just some shelter installations, painting, that kind of thing that has to go on. And then the 2 major shelter locations at the Walmart, the inbound and outbound stops down at the Walmart on Nolensville Pike are currently under construction. The final site that we're working on in conceptual terms is at the fairgrounds. It's a little bit more complicated due to the Browns Creek floodplain issues. So we'll be working with the City Public Works, the fairgrounds, and Metro Water and Sewer on those issues. For the North Nashville Transit Center, we're starting to, with thanks to Margaret and Rita and the folks at Bradley, we're starting to get the lawyers out of the way and starting to get the engineers and designers in play. A couple of the activities that are going on now are we're scoping the demolition of existing structures on that site, and also finishing up the traffic study that will help us define some of the project parameters. We're in the process of replacing our telephone system, which will give us some key upgrades in the capabilities in our call centers, places like Access and our customer care unit. In fact, one of the capabilities that will afford us as we see this uptake is we will have more of our call center attendants able to work from home, able to work remotely, with us having very current system management opportunities to make sure that we continue to process calls in an efficient manner. With respect to the mayor's transportation plan, the public comment period on the draft plan has concluded, and in fact, the final was just published on the mayor's website yesterday. So if you have the opportunity, go over to the mayor's website, and what I'll do is I will forward all members a link to the final report that's been published. There's an expectation that that will be submitted to Metro Council for possible action in December. We're in the midst of a major milestone in our fare collection system. Earlier this week, packets were sent out to our beta testers for the Quick Ticket program. So we expect Quick Ticket beta testing with about 150 folks who volunteered to begin in the next week or two. I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Mary Griffin, who spent more hours than should be. I think she put in, Gail, about 6 months worth of board work and spending about half a day with us doing some system orientation and also taking a very lengthy tour of the Nestor bus operating facility. Thanks to Carl and Carolyn and our operations department for conducting that tour. Also connected to the Nestor facility, the engineering department is developing a scope for remediation of our sinkhole. Mary was a real trooper and in the interest of being a board member, volunteered to do some scuba diving down into the sinkhole, but our safety protocols prevented her from doing that. So you'll see more information about that in the coming months. On the RTA side, Jason alluded to the fact that 2 of our 4 rehabilitated locomotives are back. The 3rd one is out for rehabilitation now, and Mount Juliet Station, if you head out that way, is just about finished, and that whole area looks terrific. Vintage Station North project. So when we get folks back, it's going to be awesome. And then the last thing I want to mention is, again, thank you so much to Miriam and our partners at the Oasis Center and the Youth Action Team. The information is absolutely terrific. Frankly, I certainly raised my eyebrows when I first saw the presentation on safety. So we're anxious to continue to partner with the Oasis Center and with Metro Nashville Public Schools, both on, especially once we get our students back in person learning, doing outreach on the Stride program, riding the bus, and also making whatever enhancements we can to the perceptions of security and safety. So, Madam Chair, unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions for Steve? Okay, great job, Steve. I don't have much. Again, I just want to make certain that I just say it as many times as I can say it, how much I appreciate all of the efforts of the MTA WeGo staff. Our drivers are out there every day and just doing what they do and taking care of Nashvillians. And my deep appreciation and admiration for them is long and wide, and I can never say it enough how much I appreciate them and the hard work they do and all the work that all of you all are doing to keep We Go going at such a high level. And you all are doing with great excellence, passion, and you're so compassionate to this city. So this Thanksgiving time, to be able to say thanks and to be a part of this amazing work of so many is quite an honor and quite a privilege, and I don't take it lightly and I don't take it for granted, and my appreciation is just great for all of you. So thank you all. Emma is great, and it's so nice to know that the future of We Go and MTA is in the hands of young people like her, and the work that they're doing is so critical for the future. And so I just appreciate her taking the time and her colleagues taking the time to sort of come and present to us without fear. She's just like presented so well. And so just really proud of them as well to be able to do that and to be able to say, let's address some really critical issues that people have about riding the bus. So thank you, Emma. And and Miriam, thank you for your leadership in helping those young people understand and be able to present in this space. So great job. Great job to everybody. I mean, just so much going on. I'm so excited about First Mile, Last Mile, and we're just moving along. We're going. And so I'm excited about that. So I'll just leave you all with this. Happy Thanksgiving. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your families. Be safe. Be smart. And enjoy this warmth of the season.
I got you.
And that will conclude our report.
Yeah.
And if there's any other business, if there's no other business, I say we move for adjournment. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Good job.
Happy Thanksgiving.